To another 7-minute social. I just want to do a recap. If you missed our message from this past Sabbath, we finished up our series called The Bad News of the Gospel. And this past Sabbath, we were in Matthew chapter 3, verse 16. And then we jumped right into Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. And what we discovered was that Jesus gets baptized by his cousin. As soon as he's coming up out of the waters, the Spirit of God descends on him like a dove, and there's a voice that falls from heaven that says, "Hey, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased," or "This is my beloved Son, and my greatest delight is in him." Then immediately, all of a sudden, both Luke and Matthew and Mark, they all record a little bit differently, but basically this is the concept. They say that Jesus is full and overflowing with the Holy Spirit. And then what's next is the Holy Spirit, not the devil, not God is punishing me, not my life is terrible, none of that, but the Spirit, right? The Holy Spirit, he's full and overflowing with the Spirit, actually leads him into the wilderness, leads him into the wilderness where he will be tested, right? Well, he'll be tested for 40 days and for 40 nights. He has been fasting. And so what we discovered is that sometimes, the bad news of the gospel is that the Spirit of God a lot of times leads us into places that we don't want to go into. The Spirit of God can lead us into places that a lot of times we blame the devil for, or we think God is punishing us, or we just think, man, life is terrible right now, without realizing that maybe God is leading us into this wilderness-like experience for the purpose of revealing something inside of us, revealing a strength within us that we didn't know was there. But until we were confronted by that wilderness, all of a sudden those things come out, right? Somebody once said, sometimes you have to, feel the sting of defeat before you can really be filled with a passion and a purpose to move forward or to accomplish the things that God is calling you and I towards. And so all of a sudden, Jesus is there, and then it says that at the 40th day, after 40 days and 40 nights, Jesus is at his weakest point, right? He's tired, he is hungry, and it's at that point where his stomach is empty. He's on empty, that the devil comes to tempt him. And the temptation is this, watch this, where Jesus was empty, that's where the devil decided to tempt. Where Jesus was empty, the devil decides to tempt him on his emptiness. And what we discovered was a lot of times the enemy will come, and that's where we're tested. Where we feel empty in life, whether it's relationally, socially, financially, spiritually, physically, whatever it might be, you and I have areas where we feel empty. And there's always the temptation to try to fill that emptiness with a quick fix. There's always the temptation to try to fill that emptiness with something that doesn't actually fill us, but actually leaves us emptier than where we were before. And what we saw was that Jesus, the way how he combats, right, the enemy, when the enemy comes and these voices come into our head, and we start to think, I feel empty here, or I feel vacant here, or I'm missing something here. And those places where we feel like we're missing, the time when we're most vulnerable is when the enemy comes to attack. And so here is Jesus is empty, right? He's empty. And the devil reminds him of his emptiness and tries to tell him, why don't you turn these stones? Number one, how can you really be the Son of God if you're going hungry? Turn these stones into bread and feed yourself. The devil will always try to point out your empties, where you're empty in life. But what we just read prior to that was a voice from heaven that said, "This is my beloved Son, and I take great delight in him. He's my pride, my joy, my love," right? And then all of a sudden it says that he is full and overflowing with the Spirit. The enemy will always try to get us distracted to say, "Hey, are you really a child of God? And are you sure that you're full and overflowing with the Spirit? Because if you were full and overflowing with the Spirit of God, then why are you in the wilderness? Then why are you going hungry?" And what we discovered was, matter of fact, the good news now is we can take assurance that instead of asking, man, why am I in this wilderness-like experience? Has God forsaken me? Is the enemy out to get me? No, it is because I am full and overflowing with the Spirit that it is the Spirit who's leading me into this place, not to defeat me, not to hurt me, not to bring me down, but to reveal the glory of God inside of me, to show me that I am a child of God, and to show me that no matter what my external circumstance looks like, the power and the flow of God's Spirit is working in and through us at all times, right? And so instead of asking the question, why is this happening to me? We can step back and say, no, why is this happening for me? Perhaps this is for me. Perhaps this is for my benefit. Perhaps God sees something that I don't see. And then we finished off with, not only does the devil tempt us where we feel empty in life, and that's like where we feel empty and vulnerable, so he tries to get us quickly there, but he also tempts us where we're gifted. Because Jesus had the power to turn stones into bread, he came and he's like, use your power, use your abilities, use your miracle-working power for your own selfish gain. And what we discovered about ourselves is what area in our lives are we just, it comes naturally and we're gifted. Are you good at talking, right? And so you just can come and manipulate a situation with those words because you're so good at speaking, and so the enemy will try to tempt you to use that. Physically, are you just like God blessed you, right? You're a physically attractive person. Are you using that attractiveness with pure motives, right, to do things right? Or are you using that gift that God has given you and using it for something that's completely selfish and not according to the Spirit of God? And that's where we have to continue to do one thing, which is Jesus responds, it is written, right? Jesus doesn't take the bait and think about his emptiness. Jesus doesn't look at his power and his abilities and say, you know what, I can get myself out of the situation quickly. Instead, he responds by saying, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. It seems like Jesus is giving us the blueprint and the model that the enemy's going to come and attack us and tempt us throughout our life. And the way that we fight is always the same way, not focusing on our emptiness, not focusing where we feel weak and vulnerable, not focusing on using our own gifts and abilities for the wrong reasons, but continuing to lean into and trust the blessed proclamation that has been expressed over our lives, which is, you are my beloved child, and I take great joy and delight in you. And believe that we are filled with the Spirit. Not believe that when we go into the wilderness, it must be because God is not with me. No, it is because God is with me. And it's because God is leading me that I find myself in situations like these sometimes, not to defeat me, but to uplift me. All right, I hope you have a blessed week, and we